Hey gang, it's your old buddy Platt, and today I'm going to show you how to make alcohol using Jolly Ranchers. So let's go. Well, if I said it once, I've said it 100 times. Inspiration comes from the most random places, and I think this little experiment is a prime example of that. I was recently in the comment section responding to a question or two, and one of the viewers mentioned something about prison wine or making alcohol prison, and made just an offhand remark about his uncle had supposedly used Jolly Ranchers to make alcohol in prison. He just kind of left it in that, but that stuck in my mind. I'm like, Jolly Ranchers in prison making alcohol? What could he be talking about? But it got me to thinking. And my first thought was, well, no, you really can't use Jolly Ranchers because it's probably just full of preservatives and additives and different colorings and stuff, and probably unsuitable for yeast survival. But I did a little research and I read the back of the package, and the two predominant ingredients in Jolly Ranchers are corn syrup and sugar. Both things I've used before to make alcoholic beverages. And reading the fine print, the rest of the ingredients make up 2% or less of Jolly Ranchers, and that includes malic acid, natural and artificial flavors, coloring, and then food dye, mineral oil, what have you. So for the most part, these are just chunks of sugar. Well, sugar's great for fermentation, so I thought, all right, let's give this a try. So what I want to do is we're going to make a 1 quart batch, and I'm going to take these Jolly Ranchers, and I think what I'm going to do is they come in a multi-flavored pack, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out all the green apple Jolly Ranchers. Now, what we need is that sugar, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the green apple Jolly Ranchers, all of them, throw them in this container, fill it with water, and we'll let it go overnight and let that sugar and candy dissolve in there so we get all the sugar. And then we'll come back and maybe do a gravity reading, add our yeast, and we'll see if it ferments. So, and if we get fermentation, then we know alcohol is being produced. Now, I'm not sure how this is going to taste, but the bigger thing we're trying to prove is, will it ferment? Will it produce alcohol? So let me separate these Jolly Ranchers out. We're going to let them soak overnight in water, and we'll come back to do gravity reading and add our yeast. Alright, so gang, we've let the Jolly Ranchers set overnight. They've completely melted into the solution or into our water. We've got a nice light green color to it. Let's go ahead and give this a gravity reading. See where we're at on this. Alright, our gravity is 1.020. That's pretty low in all honesty. Even for like lighter beers, we're at 1.035, 1.040, what have you. That being said, it appears we do have some fermentables in there. I used about 9 pieces of the sour apple candy. It was a mixed bag, so they had a little bit of everything, but I wanted to keep this at like one flavor. Obviously you could add more in there to bump up the fermentables or whatever. Like, so we're just doing this to see if this works. So we're at 1.020. Let's take this out. So the next step's going to be, I'm going to transfer into another 1 quart container because this is where my airlock fits in. I've got sanitizer right now, but we're going to put this in a 1 quart container, and then I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of wine yeast I already have open. You can use whatever style of yeast in this experiment, beer yeast, wine yeast, champagne yeast. If you don't have access to yeast or any of those types, I'll leave a link below. Or you can always use baker's yeast that you find at your local grocery store. That should be something everybody has access to. If you use the baking yeast, though, the taste is going to be a little funkier. It doesn't always hit higher alcohol amounts, even though we don't have a lot of fermentables in this, so that's not as big an issue. But we're going to sprinkle in a little bit of, literally just a sprinkle or two, like you're dashing salt in it. A little bit of our wine yeast, and we'll come back later in a few hours to see if fermentation's happening, because pretty much if we have fermentation, then we have alcohol production, and we know this thing works. So let me get everything in my new little mini fermenter going, and we'll come back and see if fermentation has started. All right, gang, it's been about 24 hours. You can see we're getting some bubbles in our airlock. You can see there's enough CO2 production where that little bobber's kind of floating above. You may or may not be able to see a few bubbles in the solution, and the solution itself is a little hazy, so that means the yeast is in suspension, and we have fermentation, which means we just made some alcohol out of Jolly Ranchers. That's right. Kind of slow fermentation, but we do have some fermentation going. So, with that being said, let's come back and wrap up. Alright, gang, to wrap up, our goal was to see if we could use Jolly Ranchers to make alcohol. What we did was took 1 quart of water, I threw in 9 pieces of sour apple Jolly Ranchers, let them sit overnight so the sugar completely melt in the water. Then I came back and sprinkled just a little bit of wine yeast. You could use beer yeast, champagne yeast, or if you have no other access to anything else, bread yeast. Sprinkle just a little bit of that in. I couldn't even tell you the amount. It would be so small, like a percentage of a gram. Into our 1 quart container at the airlock, and we have fermentation. And so, thus having fermentation means we've produced alcohol. My original gravity reading I did was only like 1.020, 1.025, something like that. So at most we're shooting about 2.5% alcohol by volume on this thing. If you want to, probably throw a few more pieces in there. Like I said, I started with 9, so 15 to 20 will get you into a, light beer category as far as alcohol by volume. I'm going to let this sit for 2 weeks, make sure it thoroughly ferments, and then I'll throw in my refrigerator, and we'll try this on a later homebrew tasting video. So we'll see if it tastes like sour apple or not. One thing to say, because this is predominantly sugar is fairly efficient at fermenting out, so there's not a lot of residual sweetness left over. So I got a feeling this might be a little dry compared to like beers with malt. It doesn't ferment completely, so you still get a little sweetness left over even after fermentation, and other things too, certain fruits, what have you. Also, too, before you consume this, I would advise you to throw it into your refrigerator overnight. What that does is the cold temperature, stops yeast activity. I've had comments about people just kind of drinking the stuff at room temperature. The yeast is still active, and some people talk about they get kind of bubble gut, or they get a little gassy, what have you. Throw it in the fridge overnight. Stop that yeast activity, and that should help prevent that. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.